welcome to Citizens Forum. This show is being filmed on Tuesday, August the 18th in the Memorial Arena in Victoria, BC. I'd like to start by thanking the volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen every week. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walt and Jack show, but today we're joined by Mehdi Najari, and we're going to be talking mostly about the federal election.
I thought it's important to talk about the debates because the Harper is changing. He not only is changing Canada, now he's changing our election tradition. We used to have a debate with the consortium of the television consortiums, and now Harper refused to participate in that in English language debate. So he's trying to get, in my opinion, getting people that are supporters of Harper to do the debate. For example, with the McLean, the first debate McLean, Mr. Paul Wells was his biographer.
Who was Paul Wells?
Was the person in charge of the debate.
He was the moderator?
Moderator,
okay.
yes.
And he is also Mr. Harper's biographer.
Biographer. And he praised Harper after the debate in the interview.
Yes, he did.
And with another group that are going to do the debate on economy is Globe and Mail. And Globe and Mail is the company that supported and endorsed Harper in the last 3 elections. This is their boy, and Harper only want to have the people that support him to do the debate so he can have advantage. The same with the Monk debate. Monk is a right-wing Zionist entity, is funded by Peter Monk of Barrick Gold, is a big corporate support and entity, and they want to do the foreign policy debate. So Monk, we are going to see our foreign policy through the lens of Monk views.
And Barrick Gold is kind of, aren't they investigated around the world for criminal actions?
They are devastating lots of land areas that they are mining in third world country, in South America, in Africa, and so on and so forth. But the most important is that the foreign policy is going to be filtered through the lens of Monk debate, which is going to be pro-right-wing, pro-Israeli views. And that is why Harper is the biggest supporter of Israel in the world.
And the debate on the economy will be focused through the filter of the Globe and Mail, which is owned by the Thompson family, Canada's wealthiest family. So, how do we end up as Canadians in this situation where, the corporations control all of our electoral debates?
Well, in the debates, the thing is I noticed was refreshing was they had Elizabeth May in the previous debate that you're talking about. And she just looked so different than the other 3. And she looked competent and relaxed, and she really was on her game. And I don't think they want to see that type of thing happening. So in the Globe and Mail debate, from what I understand, Elizabeth May is not going to be involved.
No, it's in 2008. We should go back to the background of it. 2008, Jack Layton and Stephen Harper worked together to not allow Elizabeth May participate in debate. We have a big backlash in the public, and that's why Elizabeth May was included, because of the big backlash. In 2011, they were succeeded to keep her out. And again now, in the debate, in Monk debate, and also in Globe and Mail debate, Elizabeth May is not invited. They are trying to reduce our chances and opportunity to look at other point of view. They want to have this debate between Harper and NDP, and we know that these guys work together to destroy Liberal Party. In the last 3 elections, we saw that lots of Harper advisors actually said that they work together, Liberal Party and Conservative, NDP and Conservative, to destroy Liberal Party. Here is a headlines. Election platform of election part of long-term Harper strategy to destroy liberals, former top advisor Tom Flanagan said. Another one is, here is McLean from 2006, the secret plot to destroy liberals. And another one which was the Lawrence Martin book, Politics of Control. It's quoted Harper advisor Kit Bertsley that he said, conservative under Stephen Harper and NDP leader Jack Layton aim to destroy liberals. So they work together in the last 3 elections to get rid of, to destroy liberals, and now they want to reduce our chances of hearing other alternatives like Green Party. So people have to, I think we should really pay attention to what's happening. And we see when we had the debate in McLean debate, after the debate, during the coverage of the debate, they bring this so-called expert, the body language expert, Mr. Mark Boden. And what does he say? Here is what he said. So first of all, looking at Stephen Harper, what we saw was good symmetrical language. And the anchor said, prime ministerial? Absolutely. If you are looking for that prime minister, you got the symmetrical body language, which they're very still, very ordered in body language. There is it again completely symmetrical. If you are out there looking, and you are looking for a prime minister, and you may thinking of changing your vote or not changing your vote, this is who you should vote for. In that debate, I mean, and then he go attack Elizabeth May as being modeled.
That's right.
And attack Trudeau of being gesticulating and not trustable. But what we saw, McLean coverage didn't tell us that Mark Boden was a coach for Harper, was hired by Harper team.
To train him, to teach him how to use body language.
Body language, which is absolute nonsense. If you tell somebody to behave this way, that doesn't mean that's his natural behavior. So what we see, they are engaged in public deception. They are lying to public. The so-called expert is attacking the 3 other candidates and putting Harper as a prime ministerial. This is the type of deception we are going to get if we allow corporations conduct our debates.
And you wouldn't be concerned if maybe he was coming up with a whole lot of good ideas and good solid points and really driving them home, but the guy lied straight ahead. He used great body language while he told the whole pack of lies. Yeah. So that is like very unsettling that he can pull that off.
I really think there should be a complaint to CRTC about what McLean coverage did by bringing that guy and introduce him as a body language expert, but not telling the people that he is the coach of Harper.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it was shocking to see, this came on shortly after the debate. He praised Stephen Harper and basically criticized everyone else for the way they looked on screen.
He was saying that Elizabeth May, you cannot look at her eyes, so you cannot trust her. She's not trustable. That was his conclusion, which is absolute nonsense.
You wanted to talk a bit about the situation with veterans.
I think this issue of the veterans are very important. How many Canadians knows that there have been more veteran suicide than the veteran died in Afghanistan? More than 170 veteran suicide. And the reason for these suicides are that they do not get the help they need. They are asking for help and they are not getting it. Harper government has cut the budget of the veteran affairs, and in last few years they returned more than $1.1 billion of the veteran affairs budget that they didn't spend back to the government coffers.
To me it's amazing that this hasn't been an issue yet in the election. I mean, I didn't know that more veterans have committed suicide than were killed in Afghanistan.
And they closed about nine veteran affairs offices. And people are saying, for example, let me tell you about this veteran burial fund. There is a fund for poor veteran. When they die, they can use that fund for burial. It was $65 million in it. They only spent about 18 million of it, and 67% of the requests were denied. So people are not having even a burial for the people that fought for this country, And what they do, this psychopathic government is doing, they claim that they increase the budget, but they don't. But they put condition that the veteran cannot access that money. They increase the budget, but the budget is not being expended. So they return the budget. So it's a really sick joke they are playing with the veteran, because at the same time Harper all the time can claim that we raised the budget. Look, the budget is raised, but they are not. They put condition on it that it cannot be used.
Yeah, the level of I don't know what word to use. The way our politicians treat all of us is it's just a disgrace.
Yeah, it's the casual cruelty.
Yeah.
I mean, people's lives are being destroyed by these decisions. Even the decision, for instance, to send our troops into combat, very questionable grounds for most of it. I always wondered what special skills Stephen Harper had and his cronies to know when it's the proper time to send Canadian soldiers into combat. I don't think they have the right background.
And covering up the suicide. For example, when Corporal Stuart Landridge committed suicide, he left a note for his mother. His mother lives here in Victoria, actually. The DND kept that note for 14 months. His wishes was to have a simple burial, and that was not related to his mother. And this is the type of craziness that we see in this government. And they don't care. They don't care the veteran commits suicide, and they are getting away with it.
And I mean, this basically ties into what the next thing you wanted to talk about, which is the corruption in our government.
Yeah, it's interesting. Harper talked about Trudeau is not ready, because this is a very important job and people with experience need to do it. But let's look at Mr. Harper when he was in office, what kind of decision he made. For example, one of the top advisor he chose was Bruce Carson. And Bruce Carson saying that he told Harper that he had criminal conviction in 80s and 90s. He had 5 fraud conviction. But Harper, because he could help Harper to get what Harper wanted, Harper hired him as his advisors. And then he was again was prosecuted for lobbying, for improper lobbying in 2011. So that's why we know that happened. Another person was Arthur Porter. Dr. Arthur Porter was selected by Harper to be as a head of the CERC, the entity that looking at spy agencies.
Right, the oversight of
overseers, and he was the head man. Head of the board that look at the CSIS, and he had very troubling past.
Wasn't he involved with a fraud building a hospital?
Building hospital in Montreal, and also before that in Detroit he was engaged in very criminal activity. Again, they sent a letter to the Harper. Here is the headings. Letter warning Stephen Harper against appointing Arthur Porter to oversee a spy agency. Raised no red flag. He just ignored it.
Who sent him the letter?
From other officials that that knew about his background, Porter background.
I mean, to put the oversight of CSIS in the hands of somebody who's later convicted of fraud in building a hospital and taking money away from the hospital, and I mean, it's absolutely, and yet
and he was in fraudulent behavior in past, not just after, you know. So it is another interesting. But there was others. Nathan Jacobson. This guy was a fugitive from justice in U.S., but suddenly, and they wanted him, and they arrested him later, but he was a very close to Harper government. There is a picture of Nathan Jacobson in the middle, and one side of him is Harper, the other side is Benjamin Netanyahu. So,
well, you can't get any higher than that.
But they suddenly drop all the charges because of his relation with Mossad. There is another guy by the name of Sali Zejdal. He was a alderman in Montreal, and at the same time, he was a close advisor to Harper, his senior advisor for Quebec. He was convicted of fraud, convicted of corruption, breach of trust, and fraud. And, you know, Harper advisor. Another one, Dean Del Mastro. He was the parliamentary secretary for Harper and he's a spokesperson on ethics. He was put in shackle and sent to jail for cheating during the election and lying about it. Peter Panachiou, he was the Harper MP from Labrador that was, you know, convicted of doing wrong during the election. Even Mike Duffy, we have Pamela Wallen, we have Patrick Brazeau. Patrick Brazeau was put in Senate by Harper because he was used whenever there was talk about natives, to use it against natives. So there is so many, and nobody talk about that. The corporate media doesn't talk about it, and we have to ask ourselves why.
Mehdi, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to segment 2 of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Tuesday, August the 18th. This is the Walt and Jack show. So Walt, I'll start off with on Thursday, August the 27th at Victoria City Hall at 7 p.m. and it'll probably run for a couple of hours, so you don't have to come on time if you're interested. But Thursday, August 27th at about 7 o'clock, probably running till 8 or 9, it's going to be a public hearing for the BOSA development at the St. Andrew's School site. And St. Andrew's School is the old private school that's at the corner of Pandora and Vancouver. People probably drive by it all the time. I live close to the neighborhood. And that open field, you know, it's kind of one of the few open spaces in a fairly highly developed neighborhood. And it's a big loss to the neighborhood if that entire area is covered by a development, which is the current plan from BOSA. And City Council is going to decide either on the 27th or shortly thereafter what to do. And it really raises, to me, and they want people to come out. City Council may not want people to come out, but the neighbors want people to come out. And if you go to a website called MasonStreetFarm.com, that's Mason Street is spelled S-T-R-E-E-T, the whole word, MasonStreetFarm.com. They've got quite a discussion about it. The Mason Street Farm is an urban farm right across the street from where this development is going to be. Unfortunately, the development there's a lot of bad things about it. One of the worst is that it's going to turn a very quiet street, which is right next to Mason Street Farm, into a very busy thoroughfare. And it really raises the question, do we want our city's futures to be controlled by the people who live here, namely us, the citizens, or should our futures be controlled by developers who come in with no plan in place except the maximization of their profit? That's all they care about. And I mean, I just got back from Vancouver, and you know, it's a bit of a mess over there in terms of just, you know, the loss of community, the loss of neighborhoods, and of course the complicity of the media and the complicity of the politicians. So the neighbors are asking people to come out on Thursday, August the 27th to Victoria City Hall and participate. Check out the website, masonstreetfarm.com, and really give a thought to this idea of how should our city's futures be designed by us who live here and want community and neighborhoods for our families and children and ourselves, or by developers from out of the city who really are in it only for profit.
And I don't know the whole nature of the development and how much low-income housing is going to be involved in this development, and what's the configuration of the land and all that. But there tends to be a trend towards kind of a privatization of public spaces for profit, and you'll find large retail developments do it for sure, where they just take like the Uptown Mall. They take inside that mall, and all in those stores you're standing on private land. There's if you wanted to go and demonstrate your disapproval for something, they can throw you off that out of those areas.
Yeah.
So we lose more and more of that, and as you lose that interaction too with your neighbors that you normally would get. Also, the stratification issues, because rich people are in shopping malls, poor people don't have any money to spend. So you don't find the same mix of the public meeting each other in a more accidental way, and on it goes, of us not knowing our neighbors, and there's always that model towards disenfranchising us from our decision making in the city. For instance, where decisions appear to be being made. Oh, they're invited us to a public hearing. Do I think that their minds are not fully made up and they already have a plan and this is just a charade? I think it's a good possibility, because I really don't find that there's any real meaningful public participation in these sort of events. So put it all together and you end up losing another big open area of the city to a large development.
Yeah, and the neighborhood is not opposed to a development, but they are opposed to a development that gives BOSA everything they want and gives BOSA maximum profit, and is the next step in the corporatization of another neighborhood. It's Thursday, August the 27th, 7 p.m. at Victoria City Hall. There was a letter to the editor in the Times Colonist several days ago. It was about genetically engineered foods, or as I prefer to call them, genetically contaminated foods. And it basically, the information in the letter was completely false. It was just somebody writing false information. I don't know if they knew it was false, but it was false about genetically engineered foods, which is a pretty big issue. And I've noticed this in the Times Colonist over the months and years, that they will very often use the letter to the editor's column to put out false information to people. I think it's quite deliberate. Maybe it isn't, but it seems, because why wouldn't you just get back to the letter writer and say, no, I mean, this is factually incorrect? But instead they print it and people read it. Now in today's TC, they had a kind of rebuttal to that. But the whole issue of genetically contaminated foods, it's, in my opinion, and the opinion of many scientists, the opinion of most people, a huge problem. Quite possibly poisoning us, quite definitely contaminating our environment, and yet the weeks and months and years go by and it's simply never mentioned in the media. And that's how the media operates, because Monsanto and the big players in this are the controllers of the media. They don't want the public involved, so the media just dampens down the story. They give us trivia and nonsense all the time, but the important issues they just don't tell us about.
Yeah, and the editors tend to do that, I find, in other issues where somebody might be a little more plain spoken about promoting some agenda, and they like that agenda, and they allow that letter to be placed there. And even though it's factually incorrect, and I did notice those letters you were speaking of, and they were equating how we use different plants for cross pollination and things of that nature, and they were equating that to being genetically modified.
Yeah, so they were saying this is nothing new. We've been doing it for thousands of years, which is outright, I would say, an outright lie.
Well, it isn't true, but it causes a little bit of confusion, a little bit of bias one way, and confuses the public. And those who want genetically modified food, well, guess what? It weakens the opposition, and I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah. And you've often talked about our public health officials and how they will not speak the truth about the issue of electromagnetic radiation, cell phones, smart meters, and all of that. But they also, where are our public health officials on the issue of genetically engineered foods? I mean, this is a public health issue, but we never hear about them from. Who do our public health officials work for, if not us?
Well, I believe that they work for corporations. I think that they're there to make sure real change doesn't happen. They're the buffer between us and the corporations. Only common sense would tell you to take all sorts of steps to protect your health and public health and a whole range of health threats that the medical health officer does not address. And the strangeness of it is, like, there was a case where some drug that's out on the market now, some chemical recreational drug that's been killing a lot of people, and they don't seem to have a lot of problem with that. They really aren't harshly criticizing that. And you really think, well, this is a place where the health officers can really step in and say, do not purchase this drug, it's too dangerous.
Yeah. And the issues of homelessness and poverty.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question that one of the greatest contributors to ill health is poverty. Never mind homelessness, but just being poorer. And yet our public health officials don't speak out on that either.
Yeah.
They should be screaming at the top of their lungs that we've got to reduce the income inequality in our country, but they're silent. Instead, they talk about smoking over and over and over again. I mean, yes, smoking is a huge problem, but that's being beaten. We're winning that one. But that, it seems to be the only issue they're allowed to speak on, because all the other issues, genetically engineered foods, poverty, Christy Clark's new rules about higher highway speeds, which are again the cause of accidents.
Yeah.
It's like our public health officials are silent.
Well, they refuse to ban talking on cell phones. Particularly, they're promoting wireless technology, hands-free technology in cars, when all the evidence shows that that's even more dangerous. It's causing even more accidents, Jack.
The hands-free.
Hands-free.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to matter. The public doesn't understand the technology, doesn't understand the impact on the brain. They can get away with this distortion of reality, and it's exactly what the corporate world wants to hear. So I'm firmly in the camp of saying the public health officers, I won't call them public relations officers, but they are in many ways, are not working for us. They're buffers. They're making sure that citizens cannot really get a change done because they stand in the way.
And it seems to be the truth now of virtually every part of officialdom in our society has been corrupted.
Yeah.
The union leadership is not there for us. Our public health officials, our politicians, the media. I mean, where do we turn when there's so much wrong?
Well, there's small things, isn't there? I mean, that's the thing, is that I don't really want to throw my hands up. But there are things that we can do, and there are good things that are happening. we've stirred the conversation a little bit back towards the election because Mehdi Najari, who was here earlier, raised so many great points. But something good that we can do is to elect some people that are good for us. And I really think that's important, that the old status quo stuff does not work anymore. And as far as I'm concerned, if you look at the collaboration between the NDP federally and the Conservatives has been there for a lot of years. We can make a big change here in Victoria just simply by electing some green candidates, and you get some fresh eyes on these problems. Now, there are good things we can do, and I think the public has to step up and make some decisions like that, and not accept this old status quo stuff. I mean, the elections in the recent municipal elections were generally good here in our area, and I think we got more progressive people in, but we have to take it even further. The public has to get engaged and make these changes.
Yeah, it's so difficult because people do work hard. I mean, thousands and really millions of Canadians work hard on a lot of issues, but we're always kind of at the bottom trying to push up against this corrupt officialdom that rules over us. We've got to break through it. Yeah, I would also like to see some more Greens elected. They deserve to be elected. They're getting the votes. Our voting system doesn't give them the seats, which is another.
I mean, they're being kept out of the debates, which is totally unfair. And if the NDP were truly concerned about democracy, they'd say we're not going into these national debates without the Green Party. They deserve to be there. Democracy needs the Greens to be there. And I think, Jack, it's going to be a big backfire for the NDP to turn their backs on the Greens that way. They're fellow travelers in so many ways, and to look at them as being competitors and taking up some political ground is very small-minded at this stage. And we have to get rid of Stephen Harper. That's the last thing I got to say today.
Walter, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to segment 3 of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Tuesday, August the 18th. I'd like to thank again the volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen every week. Our guest in this segment is Dermod Travis, and Dermod's with Integrity BC. We're going to be talking about LNG, liquefied natural gas, but maybe you can start by saying a few words about what Integrity BC is.
Sure. Integrity BC was started in 2011. It's funded by a businessman in Vancouver, Mr. Wayne Crooks. It acts in the original mandate. We were meant to act as a watchdog on the provincial government only, but found we were getting more and more complaints and queries about local government activity. And so we spend a bit of our time working on local government issues and keeping an eye on the provincial government. We're different from an environmental organization or a social justice organization in as far as we don't tie ourselves to one issue. We'll go across ministries, we'll go across policies, we'll look at infrastructure projects at the local level, in-camera meetings, whatever the issue may be, if it goes to integrity, transparency, and ethics in government.
Wow, and do we have much integrity, ethics, or transparency in government?
Well, sometimes it crops up.
Right. And all three of those things kind of tie into what you want to talk about, which is LNG. This summer, just a month ago, the provincial government signed an agreement with, is it Petronas?
It's either Petronas or Petronas, and there seems to be a debate about that amongst the media.
Yeah. A Malaysian state-owned company. Now, for me, the big problem here is the issue of fracking, which I think is going to poison our province, and other issues as well. But you want to look right now more at the connection with Malaysia, which is where this company is headquartered.
Well, I think one of the concerns that taxpayers in British Columbia should have about any deal like this, whether it's LNG or whether it's selling power to California, is does the government do due diligence on the people it gets into bed with to do business? And I used the California example because BC Hydro now has to pay $775 million to the California Power Authority for playing with prices during California's energy crisis over a decade ago. Who were they in bed with at the time? BC Hydro? Enron.
Enron, yeah.
Okay. Now, in 2015, we see that the government, in an absolute mad rush to get an LNG deal in place and the ground broken before the 2017 election, has signed a deal with Petronas. Now, you said state-owned, and I think it's kind of cute because all of the media has referred to it as a state-owned corporation. In British Columbia, we would call it a crown corporation. So what happened this summer is that the legislature came back to pass two pieces of legislation so that the government could enter into a deal with Petronas. And what happened in that is that the government of today has tied the government of tomorrow's hand for 25 years.
And I understand this is kind of unprecedented in Canada. Is that correct?
Very much unprecedented. Maybe, in fact, the first time it's ever been done. 25 years from now, Rich Coleman and Christy Clark will not be in the BC legislature. I can make that prediction today. Yet, whoever the premier is going to be stuck with a deal that they negotiated. And they negotiated it with a crown corporation of a foreign country. So we have not only the unprecedented deal, but unprecedented tax breaks being given to a crown corporation of Malaysia that's responsible for providing 15% of Malaysia's revenue for the government of Malaysia. Now, all of that could at one point be said, okay, we all have disputes over these types of agreements. But one of the things that got missed in all of the coverage about the LNG deal was what's been called by Bloomberg News the scandal that ate Malaysia. And the best way to try to explain it is to put it in very broad strokes. Right now, the Prime Minister of Malaysia is under investigation for siphoning off $700 million US from another crown corporation in Malaysia and mysteriously having the money turn up in his personal bank accounts offshore. I'm not really certain that that's kind of the business partner we want to have in British Columbia. In fact, it's definitely not the business partner we should be having. But we now have the extraordinary position that the government's put us in. What happens if, as many people are predicting, the government in Malaysia falls?
Well, does anything happen? I mean, we have this deal that we've now signed. It's good for Petronas, and I assume the deal will just continue through the 25 years, basically locking us in to very low taxes and very low royalties, I think. And if we want to change anything, we have to pay them.
And very few jobs for British Columbians. I'd add, though, that there is no guarantee, even with the agreement, even with all of the news releases and photo ops that they've done, that this will ever actually take place.
And that's our only hope, as far as I can tell. I think the government of BC is now committed, but Petronas has 5 or 6 years to make their decision.
Yeah, and what was interesting about the BC legislature session was immediately after the legislature broke, Mike de Jong got on a plane and flew to Malaysia. Right. Now, the Prime Minister...
Mike de Jong being
the BC finance minister.
Who negotiated the deal.
And in that week, the Prime Minister of Malaysia had 2 foreign visitors, Finance Minister Mike de Jong and British Prime Minister Cameron. Only one of the individuals confronted Malaysia's Prime Minister on the issues of corruption in Malaysia, and it was not BC's Finance Minister. It was the Prime Minister of England, Mr. Cameron, who did that. Remarkably, for a government that's so into photo opportunities, there was no photo released by the BC government of Mr. de Jong meeting with the Prime Minister of Malaysia to update him on the progress made in BC. The only photo was released by the Prime Minister of Malaysia himself.
So let's say the government of Malaysia falls. Will that have any impact on what's going to be happening here with LNG?
It could have an incredible impact, because a new government could, as we've seen this government do with its crown corporations, decide it doesn't want to proceed with the project.
Oh, so that's good.
Well, it could also mean that they decide to sell their interest into a signed, sealed deal to another energy company. I think
Right.
one of the things that gets forgotten with all of these projects that the government undertakes, such as tree farm licenses, P3s, and these LNG agreements, is that they're also creating an asset for the people that they're signing the agreements with. Assets that can be sold, traded to other players who may not be party to the agreement today.
Now, I contacted the provincial government and I asked the question, if 2 or 3, let's say 5 years down the road, the government of BC decides that because of the poisoning of our water and land through fracking, we want to reduce or shut down the LNG industry, can we do that without paying Petronas? And they absolutely refused to even answer that question. I've never seen that from the government. They simply refused to answer the question. So it's almost as if we're locked into poisoning ourselves now in this LNG deal with Petronas.
Well, certainly most agreements that are signed with the government, whether it's British Columbia or Canada, are contracts signed with major corporations will include some type of an exit clause, that there will be a penalty that will be paid depending upon when the contract is canceled. We saw that when Jean Chrétien was elected Prime Minister and canceled the rescue helicopter contract that Brian Mulroney had entered into as Prime Minister. And so in the case of Petronas, or Pacific Northwest LNG, which is what it's called in BC, who's also a donor to the BC Liberal Party, you have to recognize that they will probably have built into the agreement some type of escalating cancellation fee, depending upon how far the investment has gone along.
Do you think this LNG industry is ever going to happen in this province?
If I were a betting man, I wouldn't be betting on it happening in the next 10 to 15 years.
Well, to me, that's just good news.
And the reason is simply because there's a glut
Yes.
of LNG on the market. There are numerous players, players in North America and in Canada, who are further advanced than British Columbia is. I think it's forgotten that there are LNG projects in the planning stages in Atlantic Canada, in Oregon, excuse me, and in Louisiana, where not only are there projects in the planning stages, there are projects in the ground that have advanced considerably further. All of this is new supply coming on the market, and you see in Australia as well a major effort to increase supply there. BC, if it ever does have an LNG industry, may find itself only a bit player in a very large global activity.
I mean, at a time when one of the biggest issues in the world is climate change, and another big issue is fracking, to me the whole industry seems, why would we want to create an industry that is going to damage us in so many very serious ways, and yet we move ahead? I hope you're right when you say that you think it's not going to happen.
No.
But that's just economics.
That's economics. And I think the interesting things, and British Columbians should be looking at this, is whenever you see information being put out on the LNG industry in BC, it's often tinged by politics. Oh, well, that's what the NDP says. Or, oh, yeah, Christie, she's going to push through LNG no matter what. Go take a look at the business press. Look at Bloomberg's, look at Financial Times, Financial Post, Globe and Mail Report on Business, the International Energy Association. And you will see from all of the business press, from all of the international agencies, warning signs that we do not need this new supply for at least 20 years.
Dermot, I hope you're right. Thank you very much.
Good to be back.
And Integrity BC, thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to the last segment of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Tuesday, August the 18th. Our guest in this segment is Werner Simbeck, and we're going to be talking about climate change. Werner, you've been on the show before, and we've talked about climate change before. it's not getting better, so maybe start us off.
Well, I know it's always very depressing when we talk about climate change. It seems there's never a good story ever. It seems this year has been just a beautiful summer. Really, for some people, they've really enjoyed their camping season, and it's been nice and hot. And Victoria, it's never been like this, where you could walk around in shorts, even in the late evening without getting cold. But we've seen recently we had wildfires in the Okanagan area there in the central BC. All of BC had fires. On Vancouver Island, we have fires. We had a big fire up in Nanaimo, and now we have a big fire actually in behind Port Renfrew.
Yeah, smoke over the city.
Yeah, and
Days.
we had an amazing dry summer. I mean, it rained once now. There was one day where we had rain, and the last time it rained must have been sometime in early May, and it's been extremely hot and dry. And I'm sure most people know this by now, right? So what we haven't heard, so we've heard about the wildfires in BC because now we had some losses of real estate. Houses were burnt down, That's when it suddenly becomes newsworthy. But when big forests are on fire, well, it's a forest on fire. What we fail to forget is that when those trees burn to the ground, they first of all release the stored carbon that they have in them. That carbon goes in the atmosphere, contributing to the greenhouse effect. Alaska, which you wouldn't think has a big problem with forest fires, this year has been just absolutely amazing. Last time I think I was on the show, I told you that there's this map you can go on to, and it shows these dots on Alaska, and you see dots everywhere, and all the dots represent wildfires. They've never had that many fires ever before, and it's been the record temperatures they've had. In early spring, it was warmer there than it was in Arizona. So it's been extremely warm, and now we're going to get this Godzilla El Nino. You may have heard that. So we're going to, the end of this season, we're going to get a strong El Nino effect. What that means is we're going to get potentially a lot of rain, which sounds like a good thing. But if you have really dry conditions, which we've had in California in particular, the earth is extremely dry. It will not absorb any of this moisture. So when it comes down, where you get like a year's worth of rain in a couple days, you're going to have mass floods, you're going to have mudslides, you're going to have devastation, really, on a grand scale, and then the water will disappear again, and the drought hasn't gone away. And
when they talk about this Godzilla El Nino, which I've seen in the media, El Nino is basically a warming of the ocean.
That's right.
And for them to say, oh, it's an El Nino, without mentioning why is the ocean warmer?
That's
because the planet is warmer.
That's right.
It's the way the media has, for decades now, just not only misled us, but led us into mortal danger, because they are quite willing, it seems, to see the planet destroyed, as long as the oil industry and the car industry don't get hurt by people changing the way we live, which is what we have to do.
Well, I'll give you an example. Now we are in a federal election, the longest federal election campaign pretty much in history. And there was an NDP candidate who was on CBC in an interview, in a discussion, and she mentioned that if Canada was to meet its climate change obligations, meaning its greenhouse gas reduction targets, Harper government targets. Harper signed on to the G7 declaration just recently, where they said by the end of the century we're going to be carbon free.
That's right.
Germany pushed for 2050 to be carbon free. Okay, so we got an extra 50 years. Woohoo! The point is, if we were trying to meet those targets, that would mean that and this is what this NDP candidate said in this interview, most of the oil sands have to stay probably in the ground.
Right.
And the reaction of this statement was, an attack on the NDP, saying, look, this is their hidden agenda. They're going to shut down the oil sands, and we're going to lose all these jobs. When it turns out that actually, from a GDP point of view, it's only 2% of Canada's GDP comes from the oil sands. I question those numbers if that's truly accurate, but if that's what it is, my goodness, it's hardly anything to the economy. Surely we'll shut those down. If the penalties of not shutting down the tar sands will be that, let's look at how the oil price has slumped down now. The oil price has been in a big dive. It's down to $42 a barrel. And there's a huge loss of jobs already because of that. When the world decides to cut greenhouse gases quickly because of climate change, and if we put all of our eggs into the fossil fuel basket, we're going to lose far more jobs, far more wealth in this country than what we have right now. So the NDP, with the statement of this one candidate of being actually honest, of saying that if we meet Harper targets that Harper had agreed to, not the NDP, we'll have to leave the tar sands, the oil sands in the ground.
Yeah, and for her to be attacked for saying that, it just shows the absurdity of this nation today.
Yeah, well, the media, I guess also, I really blame the media. The media does not then explain, well, actually, those are Harper targets, right? Because that's what needs to be explained. And the Conservatives, of course, they're great in spinning it. I have to give them that. They love to tell the same lie over and over again. And people just buy it. They love it, it seems. I don't understand it either. It's like either we're totally asleep or we're just too dumb to understand it. It's maybe a combination of the two, I'm not sure. So really the key is, so we have an election campaign. So what I want to say is that there was a Fair Elections Act passed not so long ago that Conservatives were afraid of election fraud, voter fraud actually. They've committed election fraud recently with the robocall scandal. But anyways, the point is that people who want to vote may have a difficult time to vote because they changed the rules now. So if you had moved to a different location, you have to make sure that your IDs are up to date. So if you have a driver's license with an old address on it, make sure you get that up to date with the latest address. Otherwise, you may show up at the voting booth and you may not be able to vote.
Is there one party whose climate change policies are, worth supporting, or more than one party?
Well, I've been sort of paying attention. The good thing is, I think that the Liberals, the NDP, and of course the Green Party, they understand the issues. And they're willing to actually do something positive on the climate front, but they have to be elected first. So really, we have to get out the vote. Last election, we had like 61 or 62% of the electorate actually went out and voted. We need to get up to the 75, 80% range, really. If we did that and get the young people to come out and vote, I mean, we would definitely make it almost impossible for the Conservatives to get back in, even under a minority situation.
Has there been any change in Alberta with an NDP government being elected, do you think?
Well, I suppose that was a big step for the Conservatives to be kicked out in Alberta, replaced by the NDP. Big step. I think they did a great deed on one hand, but the problem is that the NDP that's running Alberta now, I mean, oil is running Alberta.
Yes.
And they're just trying to steer the boat, ever so slowly in a different direction, which is really challenging. So starting with a carbon tax is a really good thing, having good targets and goals in place for the oil industry. And they actually even want a carbon tax because they know internationally they're not competitive anymore. People don't want to buy their product, so it does make sense.
Things are getting worse climatically, and I'm afraid, are going to get much, much worse in terms of food supply and even more extreme weather events in the very near future. So what can we do, given where the planet is now? What do we have to do immediately to do our best to try to at least save what we can?
People wouldn't want to hear that, They don't want to hear the truth. The truth is we would have to really stop burning fossil fuels like within a decade. That's if you listen to the scientists who are honest about it, they say we're already past a certain point of no return. To get it back, we have to really, everybody, all hands on deck. Fossil fuels have to be left in the ground. And if you read the Guardian newspaper, which is a very prestigious independent newspaper, they have committed themselves to that cause, to ensuring that people are aware of the issues and that there's a campaign on the way that we need to keep the carbon in the ground.
So what do we begin to do? It seems the first step has got to be transportation. We've got to reduce.
Well, it's challenging when gas is so cheap. People have big cars and they like driving their big vehicles.
Gas isn't cheap.
I know, even though, though it's still too cheap, I guess, in some. That's true. There's sort of the strange...
But, okay, people like driving cars, and of course that's the society we've grown up in, but we can't do it anymore. So how do we start to move away from it? Do you put a tax on gas? Do you start building public transit?
Yes, I think all of the above. I think you need to be willing to be bold, there's no, you cannot be asleep anymore on the wheel. You have to really look at what other countries have done and implement those same things. I think it was Norway that was in the news. They were producing 140% of the country's energy needs in wind power. 140. They were producing 40% more than they needed. Great example. Why can't we do that, right? Why can't we aim for that? So there's lots of things we can do, but people need to realize climate change is this slow-moving beast, and it's getting closer and closer to us, and it becomes harder and harder to fight it. And the longer we wait, the more difficult it'll be, the more challenging it'll be. So really, we gotta first of all elect the right people. That's the next thing. I mean, the Conservatives just have been stalling and putting the brakes on all these good things. Even Alberta, under the Conservatives, put in a carbon tax. And there was this big push against Dion when he was running for Stéphane Dion yes. under the Liberals for the shift, the tax shift that he was proposing. And then it was called, he was ridiculed, and it was called the Dion tax, the carbon tax. Well, that is what the industry needs. Yeah. So we shouldn't be afraid of these things, and we need to pay for it. Unfortunately, it costs money. There's lots of rich corporations to charge.
Yeah, we can't do what we've been doing.
That's right.
And we need our media to start telling us the truth. I mean, watching the media talk about, they're focusing on people throwing cigarette butts out of car windows as if that's the problem. Yeah, that's a stupid thing to do, but the real problem is the car itself. We've got to move away from the car. If nothing else. Werner, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for watching this week's Citizens Forum.